wanted to do just kind of a quick tutorial, or at least kind of a walkthrough of how to use the Oregon Laminations 2mm Deluxe corner rounder. This is the deluxe version of their original corner rounder, which was not nearly as big as this. It was just a smaller, almost looked like a pair of pliers, and just had a small guide and clipping mechanism at the end of it. The problem with that particular counter clipper was, or corner rounder, was that you didn't get a consistent cut every time if you didn't seat the counter precisely in the guide grooves on it. You could end up kind of shearing off part of the side of the counter along with the corner. This deluxe version aimed to eliminate that problem by having this much larger guide plate here, so that you can't end up with a counter that's slightly crooked once it's in the guide plate. So the corner will fit here, and then the counter, the clipper itself, the lower plate will slide up, and the die will cut the corner off of the counter where it's seated in the edge. And the original counter clipper, your clippings would just drop out of the bottom. You can see this one here, it's got this big plastic base on it because the larger piece of the metal plate is seated on this plastic base. What that means is you've got this space in here between the two pieces, and in that space there, in the center of the thing, the clippings will drop into this base here. If you're clipping this, if you're just sitting at the table and holding it at an angle, holding it up can be kind of tiresome on your hand, so you may just have it resting here like this as you clip the counters. Or at least I hold it this way because I'm left-handed. Most people would probably do it like that. The clippings will just fall out if you're holding it sideways. I tend to hold mine, I just rest it on my leg, well, which I can't really show without having to mess with the camera, but I just rest mine on my leg in my lap, resting it flat like this, and just clipping that way. The counters will accumulate on this plate here, and then periodically I'll take them and just dump it out. Most people will just dump them into the trash. I happen to dump mine into a jar of counter clippings that I've ended up saving from who knows how many games that I've clipped now. So only do this if you're completely out of your mind, like I am. So that's a good way to just get rid of your counters. This is a little bit better. The old one, you know, I'd have to hold it over a box lid or something like that to collect all the counter clippings so they didn't go everywhere. But this one you could just do, you know, over your table or wherever, that you don't mind dumping the counters out, so you can sweep them away when you're done. This is the 2mm version. I prefer this size, especially for half-inch counters. I think the 3mm on the old one was just too much. You ended up with a too rounded a look on half-inch counters, and most of the games that I play are half-inch counters. There is a 2.5mm version of the Deluxe, and I have not seen the results with that one. I just went with the 2mm one because that's what I knew. And so I've got here, just to do a couple of sample counters, I've got some counters from the latest issue of C3I. This is a 5/8 inch counter, so it's bigger than the half-inch. Your half-inch counters are going to be a little smaller. And I'll try and do this so you can actually see, maybe I'll zoom in a little bit so you can actually see how the counters sit in the cutter. Problem is I'm left-handed, so I'll try not to block the camera while I'm doing this. But you'll hold the counter there on the corner, usually with your finger. I actually use my thumb. I usually hold it and then use the thumb to guide each, to just turn it in the plate as I go, and you get really fast with that. After a while it'll just become second nature. So when you clip it, it'll push up like that, take the corner off, and if you hold it here like this, you can see when the plate comes back up, it'll catch the edge of that counter. So one thing that you do, and this will just become second nature as you clip the corners of these, you'll just pull it away before the plate comes back up. And and then you won't have the edges snagging. So that will become second nature after a while. It may seem like, man, I have to remember to do that every time. I've clipped probably 3,500 counters with this thing, and you just don't even think about it after a while. I can't remember the last time I actually snagged the corner of one of these while I was clipping. I was probably talking to somebody at the time and was distracted. So those are the 5/8 inch. You get a pretty good cut on those. Some people might like a little bit more off of the corner on the larger counters. I think they look pretty good as they are. I can try hopefully zooming in without totally losing focus, just so you can get a closer look at the corners, the rounded corners on a 5/8 inch counter like that. So I find very consistent results. You want to hold, whoops, wrong way. You want to hold the, when you clip the counter, you want to put it in the base so that it's face up, because you want the clip to match the cut of the die on the counter. So if you put the counter in backwards, it's going to clip opposite to what the die cut is, and that's going to give you sort of this weird backwards or flared out looking corner on it, which won't look right. So whichever way the die is, the die cut is on your counter, is the way you want to have your counter arranged in there. So most every counter you're going to do is going to be face up. So this is a 1/2 inch counter here, and these, like I said, I think the 2mm clipper provides the best edges on the 1/2 inch counters. And again, if I can get this without totally, oops, without totally getting the thing out of focus here, I'm trying to use my hand as kind of a background so it doesn't totally throw the focus off. That seems about the limit that I can go there without the focus going. But there again, you can see the rounded edges, and you end up with a very tidy looking counter. I got some other ones that I did here earlier too. That's another 1/2 inch. And another 5/8 inch counter. So there you have it. Just some pointers on how to use this counter, what it looks like, what kind of results you get. And like I said, you know, this is pretty big and cumbersome, especially compared to the original non-deluxe clipper. But I think the results here are much better. You really don't have to pay hardly any attention at all when you're doing this. Like I said, feeding the counters in and just flipping them around with my thumb as I go. And I didn't do really a full speed clip here because I'm doing it kind of backwards and trying to show it to the camera, so it was a very unnatural way to hold it for me to show it for the camera. But when you're doing it, when you're holding the thing and the way that feels most natural to you, you can just kind of blitz through those. And you know, like I said, I hold mine in my lap just flat and use my thumb to guide the counter around, but people will hold it however it feels comfortable to them. Somebody, you know, who has powerful upper arms instead of my thin girl arms that I have, they can clip, you know, can probably hold it up and clip that way without it, you know, making their arms tired or shoulders or elbows hurt or whatever. I can't hold this heavy thing up for, you know, 45 minutes or whatever, however long I'm clipping a couple of counter sheets. So just easier for me to rest at my lap, and then I can usually watch TV or videos or something while I'm going and not have to pay too much attention to how I'm feeding these in, because they'll always again with this bigger guide plate. Just push it in as far as it'll, push it into the corner as far as it'll go, clip, rotate, wash, rinse, repeat, and you can get real good looking counters that way without having to put in the effort on the original counter clipper where you had to make sure and look at it, look at how the corner was feeding in, make sure it was, the counter was feeding in straight and not at any kind of an angle, or else you'd get those weird cuts. So Oregon Laminations, I think, did a really good job of listening to Wargamer feedback on what they wanted to make their counter clipping or their counter clippers better. So I think they really did a nice job with this. In terms of mine, kind of, you can hear kind of squeaks because I haven't put any lubricant on the joints here, and then there's like a crossbar underneath that's in this groove here. I haven't put any lubricant on there, so it kind of squeaks because it's kind of a little worn out after the thousands of counters that I've clipped on it. But Oregon Laminations recommends using a silicone lubricant like you would use, like a locksmith would use. So just go to your hardware store and look for like a locksmith type lubricant from 3M or something like that, and use that as opposed to something like WD-40, which will act as a solvent and actually break down the grease that they put on here in the factory to lubricate the joints on this thing. So there you have it, Oregon Laminations 2mm Deluxe counter clipper. I hope this helps.